The rain had not let up for 3 days, and Lyra Voss was standing at a grave again. Her boots sank into the soft ground. The mud pulled at her heels like it was trying to drag her down into whatever cold dark thing waited beneath the earth. She did not step back. She never stepped back, not from this stone, not from this particular square of earth that the whole pack had agreed to mourn over and then quietly forget. The headstone was simple. No crest, no elaborate carvings. Just a name and 2 dates. Alpha King Dravyn Co. And beneath that, a single line someone had ordered without knowing anything about him, died in service of his people. Lyra pressed her fingers against the top of the stone. The granite was ice under her touch, even through the rain. She had come here every Sunday for 14 months. Not because anyone asked her to. Not because she owed the dead man anything. She came because the grief had nowhere else to go. It had lived in her chest like a stone of its own, heavy and immovable, and this was the only place in the world where she could set it down for a few minutes and breathe. She was not his mate. She had never been his mate. She was not even someone his inner circle would have recognized by name. She was Lyra Voss, a healer's assistant who had walked at the edge of the pack's territory, who had spent 3 years watching Dravyn Co from a careful distance and understanding, with perfect clarity, that distance was the only safe place to be when it came to him. He had been the kind of man who took up more space than the room he stood in. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just so solidly, completely present that everyone around him rearranged themselves without realizing they were doing it. She had rearranged herself too. She had rearranged her entire sense of what she was allowed to want. And then he had gone to war. And then the war had taken him. The announcement had come on a Wednesday morning, read out by his second-in-command, a man named Kael Dravyn who had the face of someone delivering news he did not fully believe himself. Alpha King Dravyn Co had fallen in battle. His body had been recovered and would be laid to rest with full honors. The pack was to mourn for 30 days and then continue, because that was what a pack did, that was what he would have wanted. Lyra had stood at the edge of the crowd and felt the news land in her like a door slamming shut. She had not cried then. She had not cried at the funeral, either, though the sky had been grey and the wind had moved through the trees like a long, tired breath. She had stood far back, near the iron fence that circled the burial ground, and she had watched them lower the casket, and she had been very, very still. The crying had come later. Here, at this stone, alone. The first Sunday after the burial she had come and stood for 20 minutes without saying a word and then gone home. The second Sunday she had said his name out loud and that had broken something loose in her. She had sat down in the mud, right there at the foot of the grave, and cried until her throat hurt. She did not tell anyone she came here. It was not anyone's business. He had not been hers to grieve publicly. The rain fell harder. She pressed her palm flat against the stone now, all 5 fingers spread wide, and closed her eyes. "I know you cannot hear me," she said. "I have decided that it does not matter whether you can or not." Her voice was steady. She had practiced being steady. She had spent 14 months practicing it. "I got a letter from the Northern Territory this week," she continued. "A healer there is looking for an assistant. The pay is decent. The territory is quiet. I think it might be time to go somewhere quiet." She did not say, "I think it might be time to stop coming here." She did not have to say it. The white flowers she had set against the stone said it for her. She had brought white flowers exactly once before, the day of the burial, and not since. She had brought other things. Yellow things, small wildflowers from the meadow at the edge of the territory, a single branch of something green when it was the only thing she could find blooming in January. But today she had gone to the shop in the park's main village and bought white flowers, the real kind, the kind people brought when they were trying to say something final. He did not know that. The man standing in the trailing 40 feet away, watching her through the curtain of rain, knew exactly what the white flowers meant. Dravyn Co had been standing in that spot for 19 Sundays. He had been home for 22 weeks, returned quietly and in secret, brought back from the border conflict by a healer who had been sworn to silence. He had come back with a fractured shoulder, 2 broken ribs, and a very specific plan to assess the pack's stability before revealing himself to anyone. That had been the plan. The plan had not accounted for Lyra Voss. The first Sunday he had noticed her, he had thought she was a relative of someone buried nearby. The second Sunday he had moved closer and read the name on the grave she was visiting. He had gone very still for a very long moment after that. He had watched her stand quietly for a while, her hand resting on the stone, and then walk away without looking back. The third Sunday he had come back on purpose. He had told himself it was because he needed to understand who might be affected by his return. That he needed to know what the pack believed, what stories had grown up around his death. That watching her was strategic. By the sixth Sunday he had stopped telling himself stories. She was talking to him. She talked to him every week, told him about small things, what was growing in the meadow, what the healer she worked with had said at dinner, whether the pack was well. She reported on the pack's well-being with the same quiet faithfulness a good soldier reports to a commanding officer, as though her only goal was to make sure he had accurate information wherever he was. It was one of the strangest things anyone had ever done for him. And no one was watching. No one knew she was doing it. She got nothing from it. He had stood in the rain for 19 Sundays because of that. Because of the fact that she asked for nothing. Because she came every single week without fail and spoke to a stone in a cemetery and then went home and never told a soul. Today she had brought white flowers. He watched her press her hand flat against the stone. He watched her close her eyes. He was close enough, in the silence between rain sounds, to hear her voice. "I got a letter from the Northern Territory," she said. Something moved through his chest. Not pain, exactly. Something more specific than pain. The pay is decent. The territory is quiet. He understood what she was saying. He understood it the way you understand something you have been half aware of for weeks and have not let yourself fully think about. She was leaving. He pressed his back against the oak tree behind him and looked at the gray sky through the branches and tried to think clearly. He was good at thinking clearly. He had led armies. He had made decisions that cost people things they could not get back. He was very, very good at the kind of clarity that comes from knowing what the right thing is and doing it regardless of what it cost. The right thing was to let her go. She did not know he was alive. She had built a life around his absence, found a way to carry it, and was now, with great quiet dignity, preparing to set it down and walk towards something new. The right thing, the decent thing, the thing he owed her, was to let her do exactly that. She took her hand off the stone. She stood straight, smoothed the front of her coat. She looked at the flowers one more time. Then she turned and walked toward the gate. Dravyn did not move. He watched her go. He watched the gate close behind her. He listened to her footsteps on the stone path until they disappeared into the sound of the rain. Then he walked to the grave. He stood where she had stood. He looked at the white flowers against the stone, wet now, their petals pressing flat. He looked at his own name carved in granite. He put his hand on the stone, exactly where she had placed hers. The surface was still faintly warm from her touch. He stood there a long time. He was going to let her go. He told himself that very clearly. He was going to let her go, and she would never know he had been 20 feet away when she said goodbye to him, and that would be the right ending to something that had never properly begun. He was going to let her go. He walked home in the rain and did not sleep, and in the morning the letter from the Northern Territory was already in his mind like something that had taken up permanent residence. The pay is decent. The territory is quiet. He had 6 days before the next Sunday. He did not know yet what he was going to do with them. He spent Monday tracking the movement of 3 pack members he did not yet trust. He spent Tuesday in a meeting he was not supposed to be in, listening through the wall of Co-Hero's office while his second-in-command made decisions Dravyn had taught him to make, most of them correct, one of them dangerously wrong. He made a note. He did not correct it yet. He spent Wednesday doing nothing useful at all. He sat in the small house at the territory's edge where he had been quietly recovering, the one that belonged to a retired soldier named George Fenn who owed him a silence and had not broken it, and he stared at the window and thought about a woman pressing her hand flat against cold granite and saying the territory is quiet, as though she was describing everything she had ever needed. George came in on Wednesday evening, set down a bowl of food on the table, and looked at Darian for a moment. "You look like you are fighting something," George said. "I am always fighting something. This is different. This is the kind of fighting a man does when he already knows he has lost." Darian did not answer that. George went back to his side of the house and left him alone, which was one of the many reasons Darian had chosen George Fenn's house over any other place to hide in. Thursday morning he went to the Territories Records office before anyone arrived and looked up the files on the Northern Territory. It was a legitimate pack, well managed, a reasonable place for a young healer's assistant with good skills to build a career. He read the file 3 times and then put it back and stood in the empty corridor for a while with his hands in his pockets. Friday he nearly went to see her. He had not been to the village in the 7 months since he had come back. He had stayed at the edges of the territory, in the older parts where the roads were quiet and the trees were thick. But he knew where the healer's house was. He had memorized the territory long before he was ever its king. He knew the address, he knew the road, he could have walked there in 20 minutes. He turned back at the fork in the road. Saturday he was back in the forest before the sun came up, standing near the grave, because he could not think of anything else to do with himself, and this was at least honest. He was not pretending to do anything else here. He was just a man standing near his own grave, trying to understand what it said about him that the only person who had shown up regularly to tend it was someone he had never once told that she mattered. She had mattered. That was the problem, really. She had mattered for a long time, since before the war, since back when he had been Alpha King and she had been a young woman new to the territory who had argued with him at a pack meeting about the distribution of medical supplies to the outer settlements. She had been right and he had known she was right, and he had still taken 3 full minutes to concede the point because he had been so startled by the fact that she said it to him directly, without flinching, without softening it, just looked at him and said what was true. He had watched her from a distance after that. He had told himself it was because he kept track of useful people. That was true, as far as it went. She was useful. She was also the kind of person who made a room feel more real just by being in it. He had never said a word to her about any of it. He had been the Alpha King. He had enemies, responsibilities, a position that made genuine connection with any single person in the pack almost impossible because connection became leverage and leverage became threat. He had kept everyone at the appropriate distance, and then he had gone to war, and then the war had tried very hard to kill him, and then he had come back to a territory that believed him dead and a woman who had been talking to his grave for over a year. He stood in the cold before sunrise and let all of that sit with him. Sunday came. She arrived later than usual. He had been there since early morning, and by the time her footsteps came down the stone path, the sun was already past noon. He tracked her sound before he saw her, registered the slight unevenness in her left step that she had had for as long as he could remember, some old injury from years ago that she carried quietly. She was not carrying flowers. He noticed that first. Her hands were empty. She had a bag over one shoulder, the practical canvas kind she always carried, but no flowers, not white, not any color. She walked to the grave and stood in front of it and did not speak for a long time. He waited. "I am not sure what I came to say," she said finally. "I thought I knew last week. I thought I was done." She sat down on the stone bench nearby, the one placed there for grieving visitors. She had never sat on it before. In 19 Sundays she had always stood. "I went to write back to the Northern Territory," she continued. "I had the paper out. I had the pen in my hand. And I sat there for 2 hours and I could not make myself write the words." She looked at the stone. "I do not think it is about you, specifically," she said. "I want to be honest about that. I think it is about me. I think I have been using this grave as a reason not to move forward, and I know that is not fair to either of us. You cannot be my excuse. You have been gone for over a year. You do not get to be the reason I stay." She stopped. She pressed her hands together in her lap. But I keep thinking about that last pack meeting before you left. Do you remember? You came in late. There was a map on the table and you were explaining the border situation and you kept looking at it like it was personally disappointing you. A sound moved through Darian in the tree lane. Not quite a laugh. Something near it. I thought, that day, that you were going to be fine. I thought you were too stubborn to die in someone else's war. I thought the war would get tired of you before you got tired of it. She said that in a very quiet voice. I was wrong about that, she said. I was wrong about a lot of things. I thought I knew how to read a situation. I thought I knew which things to hold and which to let go. I thought I was practical. She smoothed her hands over her knees. My colleague Owen thinks I should go. He says I am wasting my skills here and I think he means it kindly, but I also think he has noticed that I spend every Sunday afternoon away from the village and come back a little hollowed out, and he is not wrong that it is not good for me. He is just wrong about why. Darian made a note of the name Owen. He would look into him. Medically trained, clearly observant, genuinely concerned about her. He fired it. The truth is, Lyra said, I am afraid that if I leave, I will stop being the person who kept coming here. And I do not want to stop being that person. I know it is strange. I know it does not make any sense. But every week I came here and stood in front of your name and said something true, and I think that has made me more honest than I have ever been in my life. This is the only place I do not perform anything. I do not try to seem fine. I do not manage how I seem to anyone. I just say what is real. She was quiet again. Darian stood in the trees with his hands flat at his side and felt something he did not have a clean name for. It was not quite guilt. It was larger than that and older than that, and it had been building since the first Sunday he had stood here, but it had not felt like this before, this specific and this sharp. She was using his grave to practice being honest. She had come every week for over a year, alone, in all weathers, not to mourn him but to practice being a person who told the truth. And she did not know that he had been 10 feet away listening to every word of it. He thought about all the things she had told him. She had told him about a difficult month when the healer she worked with had been sick and she had managed the entire caseload alone and been terrified every single day that she would make a mistake. She had told him about the pack member who had come to the clinic with injuries that were not accidental and what she had done about it and how hard it had been to know the right thing and do it anyway. She had told him about a night she could not sleep and had gone outside at 3 in the morning and stood in the meadow and looked at the stars and thought about the word enough, specifically the idea of being enough, and whether she was. He had stood in the tree line for all of it. He had not deserved a word of it. He had been a dead man she invented as a confessor, a stone she spoke honestly into because she did not know it belonged to a living person who was actively failing her by staying silent. I think I am going to go to the Northern Territory, she said. Her voice had changed. Quieter, but more settled. Like someone who has argued themselves into something and finally arrived. I think Owen is right. I think it is time. She stood up from the bench. She touched the top of the stone once, briefly, the way she had the week before. Not the long, pressing contact of before. A goodbye touch. She picked up her bag. Darian put one foot forward, out of the tree lane. He stopped. She was walking toward the gate. Her steps were even. Her back was straight. She was not looking behind her. He stepped back. She went through the gate. The iron swung shut behind her. He heard her footsteps on the path, and then they were gone, absorbed into the ordinary afternoon sounds of the territory. He was still standing with one foot slightly forward, like a man frozen mid-step. He looked at the grave. His name in granite. The empty bench where she had been sitting. The place on the stone where her hand had rested. She had said she was going to go. She had said she was going to write the letter. He walked home through the trees and did not think about anything, specifically, which was a skill he had developed in the war because sometimes the only way to keep moving was to go completely quiet inside. He went quiet inside and he walked and he got to George Fenn's house and he sat down at the table and George looked at him once and got up and made tea without a word. "She is leaving," Darian said. George set the tea down in front of him. "When?" George said. "She has not written the letter yet," Darian said. "But she will." George sat down across from him. He was an old man, George, silver-haired and unhurried, the kind of man who had seen enough of the world to not be in a rush to comment on any of it. "You have been watching this woman for 5 months," George said. "I have been assessing the pack's response to my presumed death. You have been watching this specific woman go to your specific grave and talk to a stone because you cannot think of a single reason to stop." Darian drank his tea. "I have 1 week," he said. "Before she sends the letter. Before I run out of time to do something I am probably not going to do." George looked at him steadily. "What would you do if you were not afraid?" "I am not afraid. I am being responsible." "Those are sometimes the same thing," George said. "And sometimes they are not." Darian did not answer. He drank his tea and stared at the table and thought about a woman who had come to his grave every week for 14 months to practice telling the truth, and how the most honest thing he had done in response was nothing at all. He had 1 week. Monday morning, Lyra sat down at her small desk with a clean sheet of paper and uncapped her pen. She looked at the paper for a long time. She wrote, "Dear Hila Nora Finch," and then she stopped. She looked out the window. The meadow at the edge of the property was gold and gray in the early light, the grasses moving slowly in a wind she could not hear from inside. A bird landed on the fence post near the gate and sat there for a moment and then flew away. She put the cap back on the pen. She told herself she was thinking about what to write. She was not thinking about what to write. She was thinking about the grave and the stone bench and the strange, settled feeling she had reached by the end of Sunday, the feeling of someone who has finally decided something, and how that feeling had started to loosen at the edges by the time she got home and had now, by Monday morning, come almost completely undone. Owen looked in from the doorway of the clinic room. "You are going to wear a groove in that paper staring at it," he said. "I am composing my thoughts." "You composed your thoughts on Sunday. You told me you had decided." "I have decided," she said. "I am writing the letter." Owen looked at the blank paper and then at her and then did what Owen always did, which was say nothing and disappear back into the clinic, because he was a good colleague and he understood that some mornings a person needed to be left alone with their unhelpfulness. She did not write the letter Monday. She told herself she would write it Tuesday. Tuesday she had 3 patients and a complicated case involving an older pack member whose injury was healing slower than it should have been, and she spent most of the day thinking through the treatment options and talking it over with Owen, and by the time evening came she was too tired to think about letters. Wednesday she was not tired. Wednesday she sat at the desk again with the paper and the pen and she wrote the full letter in 20 minutes, folded it, sealed it, addressed it, and set it on the corner of the desk. Then she went to bed. Thursday morning the letter was still on the corner of the desk. She picked it up. She put on her coat. She walked toward the village post station. She got as far as the fork in the road where the path split between the post station and the direction of the cemetery, and she stood at the fork for a moment that became several moments, and then she took a breath and walked toward the post station. She was 10 steps from the door when something moved in her peripheral vision, fast and deliberate, and a man stepped out from the narrow alley beside the building. She had 1/2 second of genuine alarm, her hand going up instinctively, before the man raised both hands in a gesture of obvious peace and said her name. "Lyra." She stopped. The voice was wrong. It was not wrong in the sense of unfamiliar. It was wrong in the sense of impossible. She looked at the man in front of her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, rain-damp from the morning air. He had dark eyes and a jaw that needed a razor and a look on his face like a man who has made a decision and has passed the point of reversing it. He was wearing the clothes of someone who had been living quietly in the territory's outskirts for some time, practical and worn and nothing like what he used to wear. She knew his face. She had looked at his name carved in stone once a week for 14 months. The letter fell out of her hand. "You are dead," she said. "No," Darian said. "The funeral." There was a casket. Cole Hero read the announcement. I was there, I stood at the back and I heard the words. Cole Hero read the announcement because I asked him to, Darian said. There were threats from the border. Specific threats targeting me specifically. My advisors believed that my death was the safest strategic response. Lyra looked at him. She looked at him the way you look at something you have prepared yourself to never see again, carefully, from behind a distance you built over a long time. Your advisors believed, she said. Yes. And what did you believe? He was quiet for a moment. I believed I was protecting the pack. You believed, she said again, slowly, that faking your death and letting the entire pack mourn you, letting people who cared about you believe you were gone, was the correct way to protect your people. It was a strategic decision. I am sure it was. Her voice was very even. He had heard that voice before, in a different context. A pack meeting. A woman who was right about something and was going to say so directly. She bent down and picked up the letter. She brushed the dirt off the corner of the envelope. She did this very deliberately, taking her time. How long have you been back? She said. He said nothing. She looked up at him. Darian. How long have you been back in the territory? 22 weeks, he said. She was quiet for what felt like a very long time. A cart moved past on the road behind them. Someone called a greeting to someone else in the village. Normal sounds. Ordinary Tuesday morning sounds completely at odds with the fact that she was standing on a path in front of a dead man. 22 weeks, she said. Yes. You have been in this territory for 22 weeks and you did not tell anyone. I told George Fenn. And the healer who treated me when I came back. I needed to assess the territory, she said. You have said that. You needed to assess the territory. Yes. She looked at him a little longer. He held her gaze. He did not look away and she had not expected him to. He was that kind of man. Why are you telling me now? She said. He said nothing. Darian. Because you wrote a letter, he said. She looked at the envelope in her hand. The letter she had walked out here to mail. The letter addressed to a healer in the Northern Territory about a position that would take her away from here. You knew I was leaving, she said. Yes. How? He was quiet. The wrong kind of quiet. She took a breath. How did you know I was leaving? I have been at the burial ground, he said. On Sundays. She became very still. I heard you say you were going to go, he said. Last Sunday. And the Sunday before, with the flowers. Everything in her face went through something he could not name. Not anger yet. Something that came before anger, something that was anger's raw material. You were there, she said. Yes. Which Sundays? All of them, he said. Since I came back. She pressed her lips together. She looked at the ground for a moment. He watched her process it, watched her calculate, and he saw the moment the full weight of it landed on her. All of them, she said. Yes. 19 Sundays. Yes. I spoke to that stone for 19 Sundays and you were standing in the trees listening to every word. Yes. She took a step back from him. Not a large step. Controlled. She put 3 feet of distance between them and folded her hands in front of her and looked at him with a very specific expression, the expression of someone who is managing something large and doing it with deliberate precision. I told you things, she said. At that grave. I told you things I have not told anyone. I know. I told you about the patient with the injuries that were not accidental. I told you about the night in the meadow. I told you about, she stopped. Her jaw tightened. I told you about a great many things. Yes. Because I believed I was talking to a stone. Yes. The word fell between them and did not bounce. She looked at the letter in her hand again. He watched her look at it. He did not say anything because there was nothing to say that would help and he knew it and he was, for once in his life, not going to pretend otherwise. Why did you not say something, she said. The first Sunday. Why did you not step out of the trees and let me know you were there? Because you were grieving, he said. I was not grieving. I was talking to a stone. You were grieving, he said quietly. I know what grief looks like, Lyra. You were grieving something you did not believe you had a right to grieve publicly. You were giving it somewhere to go. And I did not know how to interrupt that without making it worse. So you came back the next Sunday. Yes. And the next. Yes. And at no point in 19 Sundays did you think, perhaps I should tell this woman I am alive before she says anything else she believes no one is listening to. He said nothing. No, she said. Of course not. Because you were assessing. Because it was strategic. She turned and started walking. Not toward the post station. Not back toward the clinic. Just walking, the direction people walk when they need to move because staying still is not an option. He went after her. Not grabbing, not blocking her path. Just walking beside her at a respectful distance, 2 feet to her left, matching her pace. I am not going to pretend I have a good explanation, he said. Good, she said. Do not. I will tell you the true one. I am not sure I want it. The first Sunday I did not know what I was saying. The second Sunday I understood, and I came back because I needed to understand it more. And after that I came back because you were the only person in this territory who was telling the truth about anything, and I had been away from truth for a very long time. She kept walking. He kept pace. That is not an explanation, she said. That is a reason. They are different. You are right. Do not agree with me right now. I am too angry to hear it as anything but management. He stopped agreeing with her. They walked for a while. The village fell away behind them. The road curved toward the edge of the territory, where the older trees began. She walked without apparent destination and he walked beside her because there was nowhere else he should be. You said something at the grave, she said eventually. When the enemy came close. A few months ago. I heard something in the road and turned around. He did not answer. I thought it was an animal, she said. I thought it was a dog from the village that had gotten loose. She glanced sideways at him. It was not a dog. No. You stepped in. There was someone in the road who meant you harm. I removed him. She stopped walking. He stopped 2 steps later and turned to face her. You removed him, she said. Yes. And then I stood in the road and I said, she stopped. He saw the color in her face change, something she could not entirely control. I said something to the grave. Yes. She pressed one hand briefly over her eyes. 1 second, 2 seconds. She took the hand away. I said I always felt safer near you, she said. That it had not changed. Yes. And you were 4 feet away in the dark. Yes. She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back. He did not try to look anything other than what he was, which was a man who had made choices that were not defensible and was not going to insult her by dressing them up. What do you want? She said. Right now. Not strategically, not for the pack, not because of anything else. What do you actually want? He had not been asked that in a very long time. He had been asked what was necessary and what was possible and what the territory required. He could not remember the last time someone had asked what he wanted. I want you to not mail that letter, he said. She looked at the envelope in her hand. That is a very small answer for a very large problem, she said. I know. You cannot unfake your death and say please do not leave and expect that to be enough. I know that too. Then why are you here? He looked at her directly. Because watching you walk away through that gate last Sunday was the first thing in 22 weeks that felt completely wrong. She held his gaze. Everything else, he said, I could justify. I could construct a reason. This is strategy, this is protection, this is what the territory needs. But you picking up your bag and saying goodbye to a stone while I stood in the trees and let you do it, that one I could not make right in my head no matter how I turned it. The trees moved above them. Somewhere in the distance the park's bells rang out the midday hour. She looked at the letter. She looked at him. She put the letter into the pocket of her coat. You are going to have a great deal to answer for, she said. To me, to co-hero, to this entire territory. I know. I am not forgiving anything today. I know that too. Then what are you asking for? Time, he said. Just time. She studied him for another moment, the long careful look of someone who has learned to read situations accurately and is now applying that skill to something considerably more personal than a park meeting. One condition, she said. Name it. You do not hide from me again. Ever. I do not care what the strategy is. I do not care what the threat is. You do not disappear and leave me believing something that is not true. Yes, he said. She nodded once, the same decisive nod she used when she had settled something in her mind. Now walk me back, she said. And start explaining yourself. I want the actual version, not the strategic one. He fell into step beside her and began to talk, and for the first time in 22 weeks he told someone the whole true story, and the road was long enough that he did not run out of it before they reached the village. The news that Alpha King Mira Cole was alive moved through the park the way fire moves through dry grass. Cole Hero had it at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, 3 days after Lyra had not mailed her letter. He was sitting at his desk reviewing border reports when the door opened and Darian walked in and said, "You have been running this place well. Better than I expected." Cole Hero was a composed man who had managed a great deal of difficult news in his life. He stared at Darian for 11 full seconds, which was very long for a composed man, and then he said, "You absolute fool." Which Darian felt was fair. The conversation that followed lasted for hours. Cole did not shout. He was too controlled for shouting and also, Darian suspected, too relieved, though he would not have said so and Darian did not push it. They sat across from each other and Darian laid out every decision he had made since the border conflict, the reasoning, the intelligence that had driven it, the cost of it, and Cole listened and asked precise questions and did not pretend to be less angry than he was. "You should have told me," Cole said. "From the moment you were back in this territory, you should have told me." "I know. I have been making decisions as acting authority. Half of those decisions I would have made differently if I had known you were alive and watching. I know that too. And you are going to stand here and tell me it was necessary." "No," Darian said. "I am going to tell you it was what I decided and that some of it was right and some of it was wrong and that I owe you, specifically, an accounting of the parts that were wrong." Cole looked at him for a long moment. He picked up his pen. He put it back down. "The park meeting is Thursday," Cole said. "You will address them yourself?" "Yes. I will be there. I will not bail you out if they are angry. I would not ask you to." Cole nodded once. "And the woman?" "Lyra Voss." Darian did not say anything. "I have been here for 14 months, Darian. I have noticed the healer's assistant who leaves the village every Sunday afternoon and returns quieter than she left. I have not said anything because it was not my business to say anything. But now it appears to be connected to you, and so I am asking." "She came to the grave," Darian said. "Every Sunday." Cole's expression shifted. Slight. Careful. "For 14 months, he said. "Yes." "And you watched her?" "Yes." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Does she know everything?" "She knows enough," Darian said. "She is," he stopped. He thought about how to say it accurately. "She is not a person who forgives easily or quickly, and she should not be, and I am not asking her to. I told her the truth. What she does with it is her decision." Cole looked at him with the expression of a man who has known another man for many years and is now seeing him with some new information layered over the old. "You let her grieve you for over a year," Cole said. "Yes. And now you want her to." I am not asking her for anything she is not willing to give, Darian said. I asked for time. That is all. Cole considered this. Is that the truth? It is the only truth I know how to say about her, Darian said. I do not have anything else worked out. Cole picked up his pen again. He looked at his papers. Thursday, he said. 6 in the evening. Do not be late to your own return. Darian stood up. Cole. What? You did well. The border, the pack, the decisions. You did well. Cole did not look up from his papers. But the line of his shoulders shifted, just slightly, and Darian saw it. He left and went to find Lyra. She was at the clinic. She was always at the clinic in the mornings. He knocked on the outer door, which felt strange, knocking on a door in his own territory, and no one answered and looked at Darian with the focused assessment of a medical person who has just encountered something clinically unexpected. Alpha King Cole, Owen said. Is she here? She is with a patient. 20 minutes. He waited outside. The morning was sharp and clear. He sat on the low stone wall beside the clinic door and watched the village wake up around him, the ordinary movement of people who did not yet know he was back, the baker opening his shutters, a group of children running past toward the schoolroom, 2 older women talking at the corner of the road. He had ruled all of this. He had made decisions that protected these streets and these people, and he had done it well, mostly, and he had also done it alone in a way that had cost him things he had not understood were being spent until they were gone. Lyra came out of the clinic 23 minutes later. She saw him on the wall. She stopped, very briefly, the half-second pause of someone who has not yet decided how to configure their face, and then she continued walking toward him and her face settled into something neutral and alert. You are sitting outside my clinic, she said. You said I should not hide. I am not hiding. She tilted her head slightly. The closest thing to acknowledging a point that she was going to offer him this morning. She sat down on the wall at a comfortable distance and looked at the street. Cole Hero knows, she said. He knew this morning. How did that go? He called me an absolute fool. Accurate. He said so twice, Darian said. Once at the start and once at the end, for emphasis. She almost smiled. It did not quite complete itself, but it came close, which was more than he had expected. Thursday there is a pack meeting, Darian said. I will address everyone then. It is going to be complicated, she said. That is a kind word for it. You were their king, she said. You led them. And then you let them believe you were dead for 40 months. Some of them are going to be glad you are back. Some of them are going to be furious. Some of them are going to feel both at the same time and not know what to do with it. Yes. You will need to be very honest on Thursday, she said. Not strategic. Not managed. Actually honest. You are the second person to distinguish between those things today. Because they are genuinely different things, she said, and you have a tendency to conflate them. He looked at her. You noticed that about me. Before the war. I noticed a great many things about you before the war, she said, and then stopped, as though she had not quite meant to say it that directly. He did not press it. She looked down at her hands. She had healer's hands, practical and capable. She turned them over once, a small gesture. I have been thinking, she said, about why I kept coming to that grave. You said it was the only place you did not perform anything. She glanced sideways at him. A flicker. You were listening. Every word. Then you already know most of it. I want to hear the part you have not said to the stone. She was quiet for a long moment. The baker across the road closed his shutters and went back inside. The children's voices had faded toward the schoolroom. I kept coming, she said carefully, because it was the only place where I was allowed to say what was true about you. About what I thought about you. About, she stopped. Reconsidered her phrasing. I was in love with you, she said. Simply, precisely, the way she said everything. Before the war. For a long time before the war, actually. And I never told anyone. And you died, or I thought you died, and I had nowhere to put it. And the grave was the only place that made sense. Dravyn did not say anything. I am not telling you that as an invitation, she said. I am telling you because you have listened to a great deal of what I said at that grave and you deserve to hear the part 1 kept back. You deserve the full account. You said it was not about me specifically, he said. Last Sunday. I was trying to be responsible, she said. I have a habit of trying to be responsible. As do I, he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. Something moved between them that was not words. I am still angry, she said. I know. You let me grieve you, she said. That is not a small thing. I sat at that grave and I cried. I told that stone things that I would not have said to another living person and you were standing in the trees listening and you did not stop it. That is going to take time to work through. I know. And you have to get through Thursday first, she said. And Kael. And the pack, and all of the explanations and the politics and the borders and everything else that has been waiting for you while you stood in the trees watching my Sunday visits. You have a great deal of work ahead of you. I do, he said. So what are you doing sitting outside my clinic? He looked at her steadily. Making sure you are still here, he said. She held his gaze for a moment. I am still here, she said quietly. She stood up from the wall. She straightened her coat. She looked at him once more, measured and clear, the look she used when she was filing information accurately. Thursday evening, she said. I will be at the back of the crowd. Where I usually am. I will find you after, he said. See that you do, she said. She went back into the clinic. The door closed behind her. He sat on the wall for another moment, listening to the ordinary sounds of the village, and for the first time in 22 weeks he did not feel like a man with a plan. He felt like a man with something better than a plan. Something that might, given enough time and honesty, become real. He stood up and went to find Kael and start the long walk of being alive again. The pack meeting was held in the large open hall at the center of the village, the one they use for elections and treaty agreements and the kind of announcements that needed to be made standing up and in front of everyone. It was full. Word had moved through the territory faster than Dravyn had anticipated, which he should have anticipated because he had been gone for over a year and he had underestimated how quickly a pack communicates when something significant happens. By Thursday evening, nearly every adult in the territory was packed into the hall or standing at the open doors or crowded outside in the yard, and the sound of 200 people who do not know what they are feeling yet is a particular kind of sound, low and tense and full of suppressed things. Lyra stood at the back, near the right wall. She had a clear view of the front of the hall. She had positioned herself that way deliberately. She wanted to see his face, not the back of his head. Kael came in first. He stood at the front of the hall without speaking, which quieted the room faster than any words would have, because Kael's silence had weight to it. He looked at the assembled pack, made a single small gesture toward the side door, and stepped back. Dravyn walked in. The sound the room made was like nothing Lyra had heard before. It was not a gasp and it was not a cheer and it was not a cry, it was all of those things overlapping each other in the same moment, 200 people's shock and recognition and grief and relief colliding in the air. She heard someone near her make a sound that was mostly just breath, forced out by feeling too large to hold in. She was very still. She had already processed her shock. She had 3 days. These people had not had 3 days. She watched them process it and felt something complicated and tender about it, the way you feel watching people learn something you have already learned, aware that you cannot carry them through it but wishing you could make it faster. Dravyn stood at the front of the hall. He did not look like a king who had returned in triumph. He looked like a man who understood exactly what he had done to the people in this room and was not trying to manage their reaction to it. He looked like himself, which was, she had always thought, the most startling thing about him. He was the same in the hall as he was in a rainstorm or across a table or standing in a road with his hands raised in peace. There was no performance in him. That had always struck her. He waited for the room to settle. It took a while. People embraced each other, or stood frozen, or pressed their hands over their mouths. A child near the front asked her father in a loud whisper why everyone was crying, and the father could not immediately answer. When the room was quiet enough, Dravyn spoke. "I owe each of you the truth," he said. "Not a strategic version of it. Not a managed version. The actual truth of what happened and what I chose and what I was wrong about." Lyra watched his hands. He kept them at his sides, open. No gestures, no performance. He told them about the border conflict, the specific threat against his life, the intelligence that had led his advisors to recommend the staged death. He told them what he had known and when he had known it. He told them about coming back, quietly, the weeks of watching and assessing. He told them about Co-Hero and the decisions that had been made in his absence and which ones were correct and which one was not, and for that one he named it precisely and told them how he planned to address it. He did not tell them about the cemetery. He did not tell them about the Sundays. That was between him and one person, and it was not the pack's business. When he had finished, the room was quiet for a different reason than before. The shock had been processed. What was left was the harder thing, the thing you are left with when you are finished being surprised and have to decide what you actually think. An older man near the center of the hall stood up. His name was Bernard Hale, and he had been in the territory longer than Dravyn had been alive, and he had the kind of authority that came from outlasting everyone around you. "You made a decision that was not yours alone to make," Bernard said. "The pack's grief at your death was not a strategy. It was real. You do not get to decide that other people's pain is an acceptable cost without their agreement." "You are right," Dravyn said. "I want to be sure you are not simply agreeing to manage the room." "I am agreeing because you are right," Dravyn said. "I cannot defend what it cost this pack to grieve me. I can only tell you that I understand that cost differently than I did, and that I will not make that kind of decision alone again." Bernard looked at him for a long moment. "Can you tell us why it is different now? What changed?" Dravyn was quiet for a bit. "I learned something," he said, "about what absence costs people. And I had not understood it before." Bernard nodded. He sat down. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement, and in Bernard Hale's word that was meaningful. The meeting went on for another 2 hours. There were hard questions and fair anger and genuine emotion from people who had respected him and felt his death as a loss and now did not know where to put that feeling. He answered everything. He did not deflect once. Lyra watched from the back wall. She watched the pack move through their reaction and arrive, slowly, at something that was not resolution but was at least the beginning of it. She watched Dravyn handle it with a steadiness she recognized, the same steadiness she had seen in him across a meeting table years ago, the steadiness that made it possible to trust him with difficult things. She also watched for the moment, which came about halfway through, when he looked to the back of the room. He found her immediately. She did not know why that surprised her. He had been finding her in a crowd for months, in the trees, in the rain, from 40 feet away in poor light. Looking across a hall full of people should have been simple for him. He looked at her for 2 seconds. Then he looked back at the man who was speaking to him. She let out a breath. She stayed through the rest of the meeting, and then she stayed for the part after, when people came up to him in small groups and said their piece or asked their question or stood close to him and looked at him the way people look at something they were not sure they would see again. She watched Owen come and stand beside her and not say a word, which was why she was glad Owen was her colleague. "Go on," Owen said eventually. "I am waiting for the room to clear," she said. "It is going to take a while," he said. "He is popular, even when he has done something that made everyone in this room cry for a year. Go now while there is still a crowd. It will be easier." She looked at him sideways. Owen had a very mild face and a very sharp understanding of people. She had always appreciated that about him. She walked toward the front of the hall. The crowd was still thick near Dravyn. She stopped at a small distance, at the edge of the cluster, and waited. He was talking to an elderly woman, bent slightly toward her to hear her, nodding. The woman patted his arm 3 times and then turned and made her way slowly through the crowd, and Darian straightened and his eyes moved immediately to Lyra. 2 steps. He closed the distance in 2 steps. You stayed, he said. I said I would. He looked at her, and she could see what the 2 hours had cost him. Not in a broken way, but in the way of a man who has told the truth at length and in detail and let it land on people who deserve to throw it back at him if they needed to. He was tired in a particular way that she recognized, the tiredness of someone who has done something right and difficult. Come outside, she said. They went out through the side door, the one that led to the narrow yard between the hall and the next building. The noise of the crowd followed them faintly. The evening was cool and dark and smelled like wood smoke from someone's hut nearby. She turned to face him. You were honest in there, she said. I tried to be. Bernard Hale's question, she said. About what changed? You said you learned what absence costs people. Yes. You learned it from me, she said. From standing in the trees every Sunday. Yes, he said. I need you to know, she said, that I am not sure how I feel about being the thing that changed you. I am not sure I wanted to play that role. I was not trying to teach you anything. I was trying to say things I needed to say. I know that, he said. I did not choose to learn it from you specifically. I stood in those trees because I could not stop, and what you said when you believed you were not being heard was the most honest thing I had encountered in a very long time. What I took from it was not your intention. But I am not going to pretend I did not take it. She considered this. That is a good answer, she said. I have had 3 days to think about what to say to you. I know, she said. So have I. He looked at her steadily. I do not need you to forgive me tonight, he said. I said that. I meant it. I know what I did and I know it is not a small amount of ground to cover and I am not going to rush you through it. No, she said. But I want to say something. And I need you to not manage your reaction to it. I need you to just hear it. All right. She stood squarely in front of him. She had spent her whole adult life being practical, looking at situations clearly, not dramatizing. She had no intention of starting now. I have been in love with you for longer than I have told any stone, she said. Since before you left. Since that meeting, the one about the medical supplies. Since you considered the point. You took 3 minutes to say it and when you said it you were looking directly at me and you said I was right and I thought, this is a man I would follow anywhere, which is a terrible thing to think about someone who does not know you exist. He was very still. And then you went to war and died and I thought, right, that is the end of that, and I went and I cried at your grave for a year because I did not have anywhere else to put it. And now you are standing in front of me in a yard behind the meeting hall and you are very much alive and I still do not know what to do about it except say it plainly. He opened his mouth. I am not finished, she said. You said you would hear it. He closed his mouth. I am angry, she said. That is also true and it does not cancel anything else out. Both things are real at the same time. I can be furious about the Sundays and about being lied to by omission for 22 weeks and also be glad you are standing here. Those 2 things are living in me simultaneously and I am not going to try to resolve them tonight because they do not need to be resolved tonight. She paused. What I am asking for is the same thing you asked for, she said. Time. And honesty. No more trees. No more standing at a careful distance and watching. If you want to be in my life, you are in it. Not at the edge of it. He looked at her for a moment. Long enough that she could see him being careful, being precise, making sure what he said was the true version and not the managed one. I know you, he said. I know you in the way that comes from listening when you do not know you are being listened to, which is not the right way, and I am aware of that. But I know how you think and how you argue and how you handle difficult things and how you stand in a meadow at 3 in the morning asking yourself if you are enough. And I want the rest, he said. The parts that happen in daylight. The parts you do not say to stones. She held his gaze. That was better than I expected, she said. I have been working on it. I can tell. The noise from the hall had quieted somewhat. Somewhere nearby a door opened and let out a warm stripe of light and the smell of something cooking and then closed again. The ordinary sounds of an evening in a place where people lived. She reached into the pocket of her coat. She pulled out an envelope. He recognized it. The letter to the Northern Territory. She had been carrying it for days. She held it for a moment, looking at it, and then she tore it in half. She did not say anything about it. She folded the two halves together and put them back in her pocket. "Walk me home," she said. He fell into step beside her and they walked out of the narrow yard and into the main road of the village, and the people who saw them looked and then looked again and then very deliberately found other things to look at, because even in a park that had just spent 2 hours processing a complicated shock, the sight of their return king walking through the village at quiet paces beside the healer's assistant was something people understood enough to give room to. They walked the length of the road and turned down the smaller path toward the clinic and the house beside it, and neither of them spoke much, but it was the comfortable silence of two people who have said the necessary things and are now simply present in the same space, which is different from the silence of people who do not know what to say. At her gate she stopped. She unlatched it, but did not go through. "Sunday," she said. "What about it?" "I am not going to the cemetery this Sunday," she said. "No," he said. "I might go at some point," she said. "When I am ready. To do something with those flowers. Put them somewhere real." "I will go with you," he said. "When you are ready." She looked at him once more, the clear and assessing look she used for real things. "You knew I was right about the medical supplies," she said. "That day at the meeting. You knew immediately, before you considered it." "Yes," he said. "Then why 3 minutes?" He looked at her with something in his face she had not seen before, not in meetings, not in the tree lane, not earlier in the hall. Something that was closer to unguarded than she had thought he was capable of being in front of another person. "Because I was looking at you," he said simply. She was quiet for a moment. Then she unlatched the gate fully and walked through it. She pulled it close behind her and looked at him through the iron bars, which were not between them in any meaningful sense but were there, and she put one hand on the bar at the top of the gate, not reaching for him, just resting there. "I am glad you did not let me mail the letter," she said. "I am glad you did not make me watch you do it," he said. She dropped her hand from the gate. She turned and walked toward the house, and she did not look back, but her steps were different from all the times she had walked away from that cemetery. Not lighter, exactly. Something more than lighter. Like a person moving forward because they have chosen to, not because there is nothing behind them. He stood at the gate until her door closed. Then he stood there a little longer. The village sound settled around him. The evening deepened. 2 pack members passed on the road behind him and said, with the slightly stunned formality of people still adjusting, "Good evening, Alpha King," and he said good evening back, and the whole ordinary moment of it hit him somewhere deep. He was alive. He was here, in this territory, on this road, on a Thursday evening after the hardest meeting of his leadership and the most honest conversation he had ever had with another person. The grave with his name on it was 3 streets away. Lyra Voss had torn a letter in half and put the pieces in her pocket, and she had not mailed them. He walked home. For the first time in 22 weeks he did not feel like a man who was waiting for something to resolve. He felt, instead, like a man who had just arrived at the beginning of something. Which was both more and less comfortable than waiting, but considerably more real. He would go to Cole Hero in the morning. He would start the work of coming back properly, officially, with full accountability. He would address the border decision that had been handled incorrectly. He would do everything that his position required. And on Sunday he would not go to the cemetery. He would go, instead, to the fork in the road near the post station, at whatever hour seemed right, and he would wait, because she had said she was still here and he believed her, and she had said no more trees and he was, for the rest of his life, going to stand somewhere she could see him,